Welcome to Poetry Palace TV. I am Tom Beal, and this is my Diary of a Poet series, episode 25. The intent of the show is to read volume 18, Internal Revolutions, poems I've been writing to my late wife since February of 2020. Unfortunately, I have not yet been able to read them in a composed manner. It was suggested I simply start from the beginning so that I may get used to the idea slowly and add a bit more time to my process before actually trying to read those poems to you. If you would like to read along at another pace, the series is available to read for free at poetrypalacegiftshop.com. The producer of this show, as well as other fans, believe the verse in her volume is quite helpful for those who have lost a spouse. And if you know someone who you feel might be helped, please suggest they check it out. In this episode, we are continuing with volume 15. This next poem, number 1070, depending on which day you ask me, I may think is the most important piece of work or artwork poetry that I ever did. And it's the 50th anniversary poem for my grandparents. So I'm guessing I was early 30s. I met them when I came to as a member of the human race, and they were in their 50s already, and then they were in their 60s as I was starting school. And so I didn't really know a lot about their beginnings, so I went around and interviewed my aunts and uncles, and I think at that time I looked in the encyclopedia to see who the presidents were and just tried to write a poem they would be proud of. And I think it worked because every time I saw my grandmother for the last 10 or 15 years of her life, I would see her and we'd say hello, and she would say that she had just been reading that poem. And I thought that was amazing. So I guess she really liked it. So anyway, volume 15, which is Solemn Reflections, number 1070. Happy anniversary. Remember sharing the hymnal? Remember the 1-year wait? Remember Franklin Delano, whose term was faltered by fate? Remember God's test with your firstborn. Remember the strength it brought. Remember next New York City, the mission at which you taught. Remember then little David, family was started again. Did you see it in his cradle? He would teach so many men. Remember the little church and cold winters in Maine. Remember the blessing of twins. Your testing was not in vain. Now 2 sons and a daughter, 2 cradles for John and June. Did you even realize they all would grow so soon? Remember the hardships of war. Remember the prayer for the boys. Remember watching children unaware in the yard playing with toys. Remember the sound of the bomb. Had man outstepped his bound? Remember rationalizations, how long before reason was found? Remember again a son was born, your family completed with Paul. Remember the ride to the West Coast, the air of adventure and all. Remember the wear of TV. Remember its purchase at last. Remember the first man in space, how it happened so fast. Remember the cruelty of Nam, how father wished it were him. Remember the nights on knees, how grace then seemed so slim. Remember the flourishing home and the daughters then begot. Remember the souls that were saved. Pray for those that were not. Remember the growing store, how bountiful God can be. Remember the marriage of lastborn, release with uncertainty. Remember the birth of grandchildren. Remember the first signs of age. Remember life is eternal and earth is just one page. Well, now there are 4 generations and reunions are far spread, all whom are affected by the loving life you've led. Remember most of all, from the world you've seen, of the times of feasting and famines, hunger lean. It's not just half a century, the blessing of above, but the lives of 2 people lived through good and bad with love. The 50th anniversary of my now deceased grandparents, Earl Wilbur and Minerva Gallagher Beal, 1994. Number 1071. I remember the world was waiting for the greatest sage that it had ever been. I remember the words were dating, phrases eloping with each other's yen. I remember a poet's birthing an infant love verse to the great beyond. I remember each new era's girthing, the blood, sweat, tears of each new freedom fond. I remember every pen-slashed riot, every page I crumpled in failure's view. I remember the decade of quiet when I guess the bard had fulfilled its due. I remember the paperback version when the time to be known had finally come. I remember that dream's perversion when hopes of millions became cries for some. I remember the thought cafe hours, writers with brilliance in verse by the yard. I remember its sweet and its sours, how paradise falling lands oh so hard. I remember when genius was teasing, or was it a dream from another time? And I remember my life's breath wheezing for one more moment of glorious rhyme. Number 1072. If I had only realized, way back when I knew it all, and all of that was so wrong, if only then I'd just stood tall, not listening to self-pity's song. Way, way back when answers were clear to questions I sometimes forget. If I'd just pulled all that was dear, all those goals I haven't reached yet. Pulled through the rules they made unfair, through the system falling apart. Those dreams might be more than just dead air, and I'd have less scars on my heart. If I had only realized how quickly the ticking can pass, those dreams I once visualized might be more than age in the glass. Number 1073. Living. What is the reason for the horror, the terror that seems to rule? What makes the next season sorer, the phantom that leaves hope the fool? Is there no end to the dirge, lamenting the passing of days? No design sought out by the clergy that conquers this age-old maze? Number 1074. Misinterpreted dreams. I thought I was supposed to build a palace. Oh, and yes, cyber is not quite what I thought. But I tried not to balk at the difference in chalice. So to the web I went and bought. First round I bought some FTP space, not the dream of a design illiterate man. So I purchased some drag and drop options and dove in with no explainable plan. Maybe the time had come for that bard that in youth had written great verse, but attraction proved to be too hard, or there remained some invisible curse. Then an answer came targeting others, bringing poets and promise and toil. An act aimed at the bonding of brothers, dangling victories and reaches and spoil. Yet 9 months found only the poorhouse after a guaranteed promise of aided success, so that instead of a prince in a palace, I was back to the empty church as a mouse. Progress was placed back on the wait list as I continued with too many day-to-day tasks, finding the pen does not write well in a clenched fist, and success can wear way too many masks. Having a baker's dozen poets out on the field, all trying to play the same game at the same time, it's not really a failure to which one should yield, but proof in the full of the eternal rhythm and rhyme. Just a poem dedicated to the Palace poets who joined in on the misadventures of PoetryPalaceGiftShop.com in the early 2000s. Thank you all. Number 1075. My first trip to Disney World, Part 1. The airport experience has gotten less thrilling, though the pleasantries did not completely disappear. If one does feed the stray cat of fear it is chilling, it would seem that most avoid that measure of severe. So hours later that are stretched by rules to follow, one achieves their destination and discomforts fade. Though the norm looks to be a deep breath, sigh, or swallow, these only hint at the scars of inner turmoil's blade. The gap of the reach thus committed to one's history is packed baggage and claimed, boasting seals of the searches. Group travelers then sleuth through the shuttle bus mystery and enjoy sardine seating through bumps, turns, and lurches. The knee bruises tingling and elbows breathing more space. Plastic card access affords a square key in a room. Thus the holiday soldier has munitions in place and readies to battle the morrow's waiting line doom. My first trip to Disney World, Part 2, number 1076. Sunday morning dawned with temperatures almost freezing. Wind chill warnings for weather. New England would feel glee. Rubbed the missus' knitted gloved hand in an act of teasing, waiting to find what an animal kingdom would see. A walk through a search and a pleasant plastic entry left us lost beneath signs pointing in all directions. Thankfully, the flow guided us to the site's entry. Treasure maps pointing out adventures, confections. Discovering what she meant by a lot of walking, we searched for restaurant-osaurus to stomach growl. Breakfast plans were heard as we passed huddle groups talking. We were not the only Neanderthals on the prowl. Number 1077, No Big Deal. Another poet bites the dust, left in the wake of toil. Another hopeful has gone bust with their measure of the spoil. Two more ears that did not hear and eyes that did not see. Another off the path to veer, it was their choice and free. Begin again, it is the power of course. Cannot appease each whim and yen, cannot even blame the source. I was there in years gone by. I know just how they feel. There is only each single try, each risk of reject and deal. My job is done and effort spent, and cash that won't run dry. I cannot please each artist's pent, or fulfill each verse's die. I am the cheese, a favorite book, and now I stand alone. Each failed attempt was worth its look. Another sky I have flown. Number 1078, Point of View. I've been keeping too busy to just sit down and write. You know, dealing with poets after changing their plight. And it was my decision, there is no one to blame. Then what would it all be with no twist in the game? Litigation's a new word that's been coming to mind, falling prey to a web scan, more deaf, dumb, and blind. Laws may be for the weary, as alertness avoids. Most all scandalous sessions with the lower world droids. Now judicial and civil are the par for the course. Do I trash the finesse and bring out all the force? Oh, I loathe such dilemmas. Should I just pay the toll? Let loose all the marbles, let them lie where they roll. Then these hours of paving, passing 9 as I type, and the family reunions and karaoke hype. Live your life to its fullest is something that they say. Work yourself to death, being the invisible pay. Is it opportunity, despite what it appears? Are the hassles the blessings, rather than the arrears? That leaves everything perfect, just the way that it stands. And the efforts exerted, gifts rather than demands. I guess that's going to be about as far as we get this episode. Thank you for joining. Thank you very much for joining me for this episode of Poetry Palace TV. I hope there was something that caught your ear. Please feel free to check out the website, and I hope to see you again next week. Adios.